Hi, I'm Aoife. I'm a graduate student in musicology here at Harvard, and I'm going to be talking to you about what's a sort of underappreciated part of movies, I think, which is the art of Foley. And if you don't know what Foley is right now, don't worry, you will in about a minute when I explain what it is. So when we think about film, I think very often the first thing we think about is the visual element. It even comes out in calling it film. We're really talking about what's registering the images, and not so much maybe about the sound. And a lot of times when you hear people talk about what they love about movies, it'll really be about the sort of shots that are given, the images that you see. But of course sound is really important too. But even when we talk about sound, probably the main thing we think about is if we think about anything movie music, so the creations of people like John Williams in the Star Wars franchise, or maybe Enrico Morricone in some of Fellini's films. But there is a whole other dimension of sound design, and that's what I want to talk about today, namely Foley. So basically what Foley is what gives you all of the sort of non-linguistic, non-musical sounds that you hear in a movie. So when you hear footsteps, or if you hear a key turning in a lock, or someone dropping their pen, those sounds are almost always not actually the sounds that were picked up by the camera during filming, because if you try to do that, you'll end up, a lot of them will be really dull and muffled, or just not even audible at all in the case of things like footprint steps, or there will be a lot of other interference like the sound of wind. So when they really are filming, they really try to just pick up the voices, and then all the other sounds, so not just the music, but also the sounds of objects doing things are added in later by people, and the sounds of objects are added in by people called Foley artists, who are rarely sort of recognized at the level that directors or even movie composers are, but who are hugely important to the success of a movie. And what's really interesting is that a lot of times these sounds aren't even made by closely miking, for instance, someone walking across the set, but rather by artificially producing things that sound like what they're supposed to sound like. So footsteps might be produced by moving wooden blocks inside a sandbox. Or a sword unsheathing might be produced by scraping a knife across a sheet of aluminium. And they'll sort of experiment with different objects in the Foley studio to try to get exactly the right sound that will convey the kind of action that is meant to be conveyed in the film. What's also really interesting is that this is supposed to be producing a sort of sense of sonic vividness or realism, but in certain ways it's not realistic at all. Not only in the sense of the kinds of objects that are being produced and the way it goes against what was actually recorded when the sound was recorded live on the set, but also in the sense that sometimes you might see a sword unsheathing from a leather sheath and you'll still hear that metallic sound because that's just been associated over time. Or, for instance, you'll hear things that sound a lot like, for instance, footsteps that sound way louder than they would in real life. And we've gotten so used to the sort of peculiar conventions of Foley sounds. Oh, and you'll also just not hear certain things that are deemed unimportant. We've gotten so used to, though, the sort of like conventions of this that we don't notice how sort of strange and unrealistic it is. But maybe you will notice next time you watch a movie. Thanks. I hope you found that interesting.